After my trach was removed, I was transferred out of critical care to the main medical floor in the oldest part of the hospital. My roommates were mostly elderly women with dementia who would scream constantly day and night. I begged Ron to take me home, but that wasn't possible. So he slept in a chair beside me, and the nurses would wheel my screaming roommate out into the hallway during the night. The trauma of the transition from critical care to the main medical floor should have been managed better. It's as if the two different parts of the hospital were in no way connected. I kept receiving physiotherapy each day, but from different staff, since I was in a different unit, and unfortunately they did not understand my needs as they were not used to dealing with someone like me. We had to hire an outside physiotherapist to come in a few times a week to work with me at my bedside. So I needed the resources of a rehab hospital, but it did not meet the intake criteria, which required me to be able to do certain things. For example, bear my own weight. I was too well for critical care, but not well enough for a rehab hospital. This was a serious gap between critical care and rehab. My physiotherapist from critical care started to come to my bedside each day to work with me on his own time, and I don't know what I would have done without him. My stay in the hospital would have been much longer. The first time he stood me up, he used his own body to lift me out of bed. He was pretty much holding up dead weight. The pain was so intense, I screamed in his ear. He was trying to impress the representative from a local rehab hospital who was there to assess me. It did not work since I wasn't standing on my own. Every day after that, this physiotherapist continued to come to my bedside for a few minutes to work with me. He continued to stand me up using his arms and his body, and I was pretty much slumped in his arms. With each passing day, I could handle a few more seconds in this position. Later, I was encouraged by hospital staff to agree to a transfer to convalescent care while continuing to wait to get into a rehab hospital. They needed my bed for sick patients. It was at that time that Ron attended his first GBS support group in the city. Everyone there rallied around him. They told him he needed to continue to advocate for me and not to let me go to convalescent care, as this would delay my recovery and I would likely get lost in the system. Ron continued to appeal to hospital staff to apply to all the local rehab hospitals, but they could not do that as I did not meet all of the intake criteria. And even after that, I would still have to face a 3-month wait. It was frustrating and discouraging, and we felt trapped. A few days later, something incredible happened. My application was finally submitted. I was accepted into the newest rehab hospital in the city. The next morning, after 10 weeks in critical care and 6 weeks on the main medical floor, I was finally transferred to a rehab hospital. The rehab hospital was new and welcoming, and I had my own room with a gorgeous view of the city. I was put in the neuro rehab wing where the patients there had a variety of brain illnesses and injuries. We would refer to it as the odds and ends wing. By the time I arrived at the rehab hospital, I had limited use of my arms, and that was pretty much it. There were times where I felt like, am I ever going to walk again? The therapy itself pushed me to my limit, where I thought I couldn't do any more. But my therapists were always challenging me to go further. Most of my occupational therapy involved my arms and hands, especially my fingers, so I could not close my hands. So one of my treatments was having my hands wrapped tight with bandages every day for an hour to train my hands to close again. It was a very long hour. I eventually stood for the first time between 2 parallel bars with my wheelchair behind me to catch me in case I fell. With my hands down at my sides, I was asked to look over each shoulder. It made me so dizzy, and it felt like the room was spinning. I finally took my first steps with my walker with a physiotherapist on each side. It was exhausting, but it was exciting. Even though rehab was difficult, the hospital had such a pleasant atmosphere, and the patients were all there for the same purpose, to be well enough to go home. I was laying in my bed one afternoon when an elderly lady started wheeling herself into my room in her wheelchair with her head down. So I said to her, "I think you're in the wrong room." She continued wheeling herself in, and I said again, "I'm sorry, ma'am, you're in the wrong room." She said to me, "No, I'm not. I just want someone to talk to." One day, I got a day pass to be able to go out with Ron and our middle son and his fiancée to look at wedding venues. It felt so liberating, getting outside and just taking a ride in a car. There was an atrium on the rooftop of the hospital with a gorgeous view of the city. One of my weekly visitors would come on Sunday mornings with coffee and muffins, and she'd wheel me up there, and we would have our visit up on the rooftop. And I looked forward to her visits each week. At Christmas time, the hospital put on a turkey dinner and a large boardroom on the main level where patients could attend and bring guests with them. Near the end of my 3 months in the rehab hospital, I was brought back home with 2 therapists so they could make assessments and recommendations on how to make the house more accessible. Finally, I had to pass a few tests to qualify to go home. One of the tests required me to walk with my walker for 6 straight minutes down the hallway without stopping, and I managed to do it. I was exhausted, but it felt like my own personal marathon. Shortly before Christmas 2017, I was discharged for home. We went straight to our son's school to pick him up, and when he came out of his classroom, we just embraced, and it was such a thrill for us. But coming home was not all that I hoped it would be. There were no long hallways to go for walks in, and since it was winter, I couldn't really get out much. So I sat most of the day, and it was a bit discouraging, but I was still happy to be home. A friend arranged for someone to come to our house and install an inside garage door so I wouldn't have to go outside to get in the car. And I'm so grateful for Ron, who continues to work hard making sure I'm comfortable. And for all the people who brought meals to the family while I was in the hospital, and those who looked after Jonathan, I am so grateful to them. There's something so special about having a social circle, especially a church family. In the new year, I became an outpatient at a local rehab hospital where I continued my journey to recovery. Today, I use a cane and walker as I still struggle with strength and balance. Ron and I belong to the GBS CIDP Foundation of Canada, where we both volunteer to support patients and caregivers affected by GBS. We use our experience to help people who don't know their future. This disease works on its own schedule, and patients must be patient and work hard in order to get better. There are no shortcuts. My 7-month journey in the hospital seemed to inch by, but I am happy to give God the glory. Even in my darkest moments and deepest valleys, I always felt His presence. Being sick and almost dying forced me to be still. I was reminded of this by a plaque that a friend brought me to the hospital. It had a Bible verse on it that said, "Be still and know that I am God." But it brought new meaning to me when I had to live it. Please visit the GBS CIDP Foundation of Canada's website. And to watch a video of my journey, please go to YouTube and check out Guillain-Barré syndrome, Hanan's story. Thank you.